Welcome back to Limit Break 20. I'm Coleman Webb, and in today's video, we're going to be going over the job class White Mage in Final Fantasy XIV Tabletop RPG. Now, White Mage is a character that has been around since the original Final Fantasy, and it's the only healing class that's available currently in the Tabletop RPG in the starter guide. So, um, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the character sheet and take a look. So the first thing we're going to do with the White Mage is go over their primary attributes. They have a +1 to strength, a +1 to dexterity, a +2 to vitality, a +3 to intelligence, and a +5 to mind. Now their secondary attributes are going to be their defense of 11, a magic defense of 14. Their vigilance is 15, which is sort of your passive perception, and they have the highest vigilance of any character in the starter guide. And their speed is 5 squares, just like every other job. If you take a look, they actually have 5 MP, and this is important. You'll see a note there that says that they also recover 2 MP at the end of the adventure step. And managing MP is really a vital resource for all casters in Final Fantasy XIV Tabletop RPG. And taking a look, they have an HP of 24, so nothing to sneeze at there. It's pretty decent. Now, their traits and other effects is transcendent, and this is enhancement. So, uh, yeah, enhancement. I'm just making sure I'm reading that correctly. While characters under the effect of transcendent, they are immune to damage and enfeeblements inflicted by enemy abilities, traits, and encounter mechanics. Transcendent is removed at the start of this character's turn or when the character uses an ability. So we'll go over this in more detail, but the way Transcendent works is that it comes into effect if if you raise a character from being knocked out. And the reason being is because uh, you see this in other tabletop RPGs such as D&D 5th edition, where you bring in a player character back and then it's the enemy's turn and it knocks them out, and then you've just wasted a healing resource on somebody who immediately got knocked out. This sort of negates that fact so that you're in a situation that allows you to heal your allies or bring them back from the knocked out status, and then they still get the ability to use their turn and stay in the fight. Looking down at the very bottom, what you'll see here is it talks about that some of the restorative abilities, you'll see a special D20 mechanic. Now, when you heal in Final Fantasy XIV, what's really cool about it is you get to roll a D20. And if you get a natural 20, you get to double the amount of dice you roll to heal a player character. So kind of cool. I really like that. The fact that you could just, maybe overclock somebody and heal them quite a bit. Let's go ahead now and jump into their primary abilities. So the Stone 2 is their primary damage attack that the White Mage has. So as you can see, it costs 1 MP and it has a range of 10 squares. And it's going to target a character's magic defense, and it's going to use the mind. So you're going to be adding +5 to all your D20 rolls. The base effect is that it deals 2 damage to the target, and if you get a direct hit, it deals just an additional 1d6. So kind of cool if you want to put out some damage. Really, really unique. Now, in Final Fantasy XIV Tabletop RPG, what is unique about this is that the most of the time, unless the players are surprised, the adventurers are going to go first. So what that means is that in the opening round, you can put out some damage and or position yourself to be in a good spot, but makes it so they're not just stuck healing. You do have some offensive capabilities, which is nice. Going down the list, we have Cure 2. This is going to be one of the primary abilities to heal your party, especially the tank. It costs 2 MP. It targets a single character, and its range is 10 squares. And as you can see, this restores 2d6 plus 7. So just looking at that, that's on average about 14 points of healing just when you cast that one ability. So really cool there. And then there is Medica is the next primary ability. It costs 2 MP, and this is going to target all allies within range. And this range is a 5x5 area centered on this character. So this is going to be an area of effect or an AoE heal centered around the um, White Mage. Now, its base effect is it does 1d6 plus 3 to all targets, and pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy. There's no, well, you can still do a d20 roll to try to double that healing to everyone in the party. Next, you have Repose, and this costs 2 MP, and it targets a single character at a range of 10 squares, and it's targeting the magic defense. Now, what's cool about this is that the character basically gets a -2 penalty on all the checks that they do, and it lasts until they take damage or until the phase ends. So, if let's say there's an enemy who's isolated, not in range of a tank to get enmity on him, you could cast Repose on them and just choose not to attack them, and then they would basically have a -2 until someone hits them. Now, one of the things that's really important and probably how you would want to use this is on a direct hit, this removes all markers generated by the target. So again, let's say you're fighting an enemy and he's got an AoE effect and it's not going to, and you have a teammate who's not going to be able to get out of the way, maybe they're knocked prone or something of that nature. What happens is if you cast Repose and you get a direct hit, that'll remove that marker from the target. So that's more than likely how you'd want to use that in that situation. So, and then the final primary ability they have is called Raise. Now this costs a pretty hefty 3 MP, but you take one knocked out character and you can revive them. So that's got a range of 5 squares, and you still do get to do your D20 critical, because when they get revived, they get a 1d6 plus 3, and then they get that transcendent feature that we talked about earlier. And they're afflicted with weakness. And it says you can also target a character outside the encounter map. When you do so, you move this character to an empty space within range after resolving the ability's effects. That's still a little gray on how that would work. I mean, if the range is only 5 squares, I don't know a situation when they would be off the battle map that you couldn't see and bring them on. So we can chat about that, or if anybody's got some insight, throw a comment down below. Happy to chat about that. And then weakness, basically, if you get raised up, you have a -2 penalty on all your checks, and the weaken enfeeblement doesn't wear off at the end of the phase and can only be removed by completing a rest action. So this is just one of those penalties that exists if you go down. So you get to come back up, but you're not hitting as hard. So now we're going to move into secondary abilities. So the first one is going to be Arrow. And what this does is 1 MP, 10 range, just like every other ability, but this is going to inflict a damage over time effect on the target. Now, what's unique about this is a secondary ability. So in Final Fantasy XIV tabletop RPG, one of the things that's cool is a player character can actually, instead of using a primary ability, they can use a secondary ability instead. So technically, you can get 2 secondary abilities. Now, there is an additional rule that the system has, and it says it's called Focus, which means if you don't take any movement at all and you forego all that, you can take a second secondary ability. So that means that you could technically cast Arrow 3 times on the opener. So if there's at least 3 enemies, you're going to be getting 3 damage over times, which is 9 points of damage every single round as long as they're still fighting. Now, story time. I was playing a adventure on Roll20 with some people, and I saw the White Mage do something really unique where what he did is there were 4 enemies, and he used his secondary ability as his primary ability, used his secondary ability that he always gets, and then he used his focus to get 3. But then he used Swift Cast, which we'll talk about here in a minute, to cast it a 4th time, just to get it on all the enemies at once, putting out 12 damage per round, which was pretty cool. So, and as of course, damage over times and enfeeblement, and they take that damage at the end of their turn. So when the enemies have all moved, that's when they take their damage. Next is going to be Cure 1, and This is just going to be basically a 1d6 plus 1. Just think of it as that secondary action, so you can do it a couple of times in a round if you want to, but it's got half the cost of Cure 2. And then the next ability we have is Esuna. So basically, this is going to be an ability that removes a single enfeeblement to a target of your choosing, has a range of 10 squares, and costs 1 MP. Can't remove knocked out or weakness. It specifically says that you can't remove those two. But from my previous video, when we talked about movement, you can actually use this ability to bring a player character, an ally, up from the prone condition, which is pretty cool. So that way, if Black Mage is knocked prone, you can bring him back up, and then he can basically forego all of his movement and not have any penalties. So kind of cool. The next secondary ability we have is called Lucid Dreaming. And what this is you just recover an additional MP at the end of this round, the adventure step. And if you don't have any MP, it doesn't take an effect, and you can use this once per phase. So the final secondary ability that we're going to talk about is called Presence of Mind. And the base effect is this allows you to use one of your magic abilities, and you can use this once per phase. So the way I would look at this is this is going to allow you to use another primary ability effectively in place for a secondary ability. So you still have to have the resource, you still have to pay the cost for it. Now, one way to use this would be to let's say you have you're fighting a big enemy and it hit an AoE, hit a big AoE, and it caused two of your allies to go down and become knocked out. What you could do is you could use your primary ability to raise one of those characters up. And then what you could do, because that's going to leave you with, if you had 5 MP, 2 MP, then you could use Lucid Dreaming, and that's basically going to give you that extra MP, so you'll have 3. And then what you could do is focus, so not take any movement, then cast Presence of Mind to use Raise again. So just some unique ways to do it. With something like Presence of Mind, you make sure you want to do it with one of your more hard-hitting abilities if you have the MP to use it. So I think a primary ability. And then moving on to the instant abilities, the White Mage only has one instant ability, and it's called Swift Cast. And basically, the trigger is when any character finishes their turn, as almost all instant abilities are. And the base effect is you get to use one of your magical abilities, and this can happen once per phase. So similar to Presence of Mind, but you can use this as a reaction when any character finishes their turn, including yourself. That's pretty much it for when it comes to the White Mage. Um, Again, don't be afraid to spend some of those resources. Lucid Dreaming, Presence of Mind, and Swiftcast, they come back in a phase after the end of a phase. So it's not like it's so sacred you're going to lose it. What I'll just touch base on is just kind of some tactics. When you start combat, you're more than likely going to get your turn off, right? So depending on how many enemies there are, I would definitely be looking at casting Arrow with damage over time effects. The sooner you get those on, the more damage it does. It just kind of compounds as the battle goes on, and using that 2 or 3 times is a really good use of your first turn. Or if you wanted to, open with stone, and then maybe if you can hit 2 others with arrow with not moving, you'll be in a good spot. So that's pretty much it. Now, when it comes to healing, really the key thing is that most of the time the damage is going to be on the tank. And so what you'll want to do is keep casting Cure 2 if you have the MP. Because remember, you only get 2 MP back. So if you're spending more than that, you're going to be slowly depleting your resources, which you may or may not need. So using that, or depending on how much damage they take, maybe you're only casting Cure 1 and getting a little bit of health back on the tank, and then you're casting stone, get some damage output as well. So you've got lots of different options when it comes to sort of weaving in offensive and healing abilities. Another way to do it is repose. Again, markers generated. You want to take some pressure off the team to give them a area that's safe for them to go in combat. You can use repose. So lots of different options. The last thing I'll talk about is the White Mage's limit break called Pulse of Life. And anyone who's watched any of my previous videos knows that this is absolutely the most busted limit break for all the characters so far in the game. It can happen at any point in time, and it's all allied characters within range. And the range of this limit break is the entire encounter map. It's absolutely bonkers. Basically, it removes all enfeeblements from all targets and fully restores the HP and MP of those characters. Pulse of Life can remove knocked out, weakness, and brink of death. This ability also targets characters not present on the encounter map. When doing so, it places them in an empty square within 5 squares of you resolving this ability. So I will tell you one kind of cool story that happened. I was playing, I've actually happened a couple times, but basically the party was split up on an airship and they were fighting two different encounters. And the White Mage, uh, after one of the encounters was done, the White Mage used their Limit Break Pulse of Life to pull all the party members next to them. And the Black Mage instantly used their Swift cast at the end of the turn and hit a natural 20 on a fire ability that basically vaporized a bunch of enemies. It was pretty cool. So um, basically, game masters, crystal bears, as we call them on this channel, if you're going to be giving out limit breaks, just know Pulse of Life is going to be something they'll probably keep in their back pocket, and um, it's a really good use of their resources and can make your encounters either slog out or maybe not as impactful because they're just going to use this thing, give everyone back to full health and full resources, and basically continue the fight. And that's all I had it for today's video. Hopefully, this video helped you understand kind of the role of the healer and get an idea of what the White Mage job class is all about. If you like this content, feel free to attune to this channel by liking and subscribing, or leave a comment below if you've got questions or just found something interesting. And until next time, stay safe, adventurers.